everybody! So today we're going to talk some more about the Galactic Center. This is part 2 of the last video. There might actually be a part 3. See how far I get. And how to incorporate this into chart weaving, because I've gotten some questions about that. Like, okay, you have a lot of information out there. What do I do with this? How can I actually incorporate this into chart weaving? That's a great fucking question. And that's still one that I am playing with, fucking around with. I do have ideas though. I have written a blog post. It will be linked to this video. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can just click the link. If you are watching this on Instagram, you might have to actually copy and paste it or physically type it in, because Instagram's fucking weird with links. Yeah, they won't let you do that for some reason. I think that's kind of stupid. They should change that. But yeah, definitely take a look, because it might streamline this better than what I'm about to do verbally. So I want to start out with my disclaimer that I am not a Galactic Center expert. I do feel like at this point I have a somewhat of a decent handle on how the GC functions from a scientific point of view and from an astrological one. I would still love to talk to somebody who in the science realms that actually knows about this. I mean, I can read about it online and stuff all day long, but I'd love to verbally talk to somebody about this just to make sure that I have a decent handle on this from a scientific point of view. And I realize that astrology doesn't always go along with science. I realize that. But when you're investigating something new, right, when you're coming up with something new, I think that's one of, new ideas and applying them to something. I think one of the best ways that you can start doing that is by looking at what the fucker actually does in space. Right? That's kind of my idea here with the GC and looking at it from a scientific point of view as well. But I am not an expert with the GC. I'm just fucking with astrology here, just tossing some things out there. I definitely recommend that with things I'm about to say, you play around with the ideas in your own chart and the charts of people that you know, whatever, and see if they fit. See if it fits for you. See if it fits for the other people, Nothing I'm about to say here is absolute truth. I am not saying that. And I reserve the right to find any and or all of this wrong later on, because I'm not an expert. Okay, but anyway. So today we're going to talk about the conjunctions to the GC and the oppositions to the GC. And I have a blog. I have my blog post up. I'm not going to read from it verbatim, but I am going to take a look to make sure that I'm touching everything I want to touch here. Because there's a lot of stuff that has to do with this, so I want to make sure I hit on everything. I also want to mention real quickly, in this research, we cast a really wide net. We were looking at anything considered. We were considering anything conjunct the GC from 16 Sagittarius to 6 Capricorn, essentially. That's a wide fucking net. So keep in mind, if you're weaving this yourself, if you're incorporating the GC yourself, do keep in mind that the closer, this probably goes without saying, but the closer a planet or the north node, south node, major angle, Chiron, the closer they are to being conjunct, dead ass conjunct the Galactic Center, the more the Galactic Center will impact that person's life. For instance, let's say you've got, let's say you've got Mercury at 17 degrees Sagittarius. And then you've got another person that's Mercury at 27 degrees Sagittarius. The person with Mercury at 27 degrees Sagittarius is going to be impacted more, probably, than the person with Mercury at 17 Sagittarius. So do keep that in mind. The closer the conjunction, to being exact, the more the impact the GC is going to have in the person's life. Same thing with the Galactic Anticenter. The closer the conjunction with the Anticenter, a planetary conjunction or at all, whatever, the more that planet is going to function as a lightning rod. The further out it is, the less damage it probably takes. in the long run. So, okay. So, there are lots of ideas out there online about what a galactic personality is. That sounds kind of stupid. A galactic personality. We're all galactic and, you know, we're all from somewhere else. We're all, I don't know, that just sounds kind of silly to me. But there are ideas out there about what this looks like. Now, honestly, I don't feel like it's that simple to pin that down, because I do think the Galactic Center is such a wild card that I think that it's hard to say this is what a galactic personality looks like. I don't know. I don't think it works like that. But I do think that there are some themes that when you see a planet conjunct the Galactic Center, and of course you'd be want to take into account what planet are we talking about here. We talking about anything. What are you talking about? An actual planet? We talking about Chiron? We talking about an angle? We talking about, you know, the north or south node? It does matter what you're looking at. But I do think that there are a couple words that I would pick that I do feel like, okay, let's see, change, charge, warp, distort, and amplify. Those are the words, when I think of the GC conjunct a planet, those are the words that come to mind. I do think that a planet conjunct the GC will be warped or distorted or changed or charged or amplified or all of the above or some of them. I do think this does happen. I think it does. So essentially any planet that is conjunct the GC, you would be probably smart to throw traditional definitions of that planet out the fucking window. Yeah, that would be my advice. If it's a planet, you know, if you have Venus there, inside, you know, obviously in Sagittarius conjunct the Galactic Center, perhaps the traditional or cookie cutter ways that you would read about Venus and Sagittarius in whatever house would be changed or would be distorted or would be amplified, or you know what I mean. I would not, if you've got a planet conjunct the GC, I would stay away from, I would use cookie cutter definitions for things to get your mind going. I certainly wouldn't ever just run with them. In the case of something conjunct the GC, I sure as fuck wouldn't run with them. And of course you'd also want to take into account, what is the planet doing that is conjunct the GC? What else is it doing in the chart? Because I feel like, you know, depending on what else it's doing in the chart, it could kind of show, because I've also mentioned, you know, the GC is not a bad or a good thing. I do think it amplifies. So if the planet conjunct the GC has a lot of more challenging aspects, it could amplify those. It could amplify them. Or at the same time, I could also see it distorting those. Perhaps the person deals with those challenging aspects better. I could also see the GC, and this is going to sound weird, but I could almost see the GC acting as a neutralizer of sorts. You know, we do think of aspects and things as easy or challenging. We see a trine, our mind automatically goes to easy or harmonious. We see a square and we automatically go to tension or challenge, right? Automatically. As, you know, if you are really into astrology or read for people or whatever, your mind does tend to go that way. I could almost, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? You do need to take the whole thing into account, but the whole chart, but there's nothing wrong with having those schemas, right? There's not. But I almost feel like with the GC, having a planet conjunct the GC, and this would also depend on everything else going on in the chart, the GC could almost act as a kind of neutralizer for challenging and easy aspects. Like almost to where neither of them really matter. And the planet is still charged, but it's almost neutralized in a way. Anything that's easy about it is neutralized. Anything that's challenging about it is neutralized. I don't think that always happens, but I think that that's also a possibility. However, if that happens, I would also think that the planet would be pretty charged. It would still retain some kind of charge. Let me see if I missed anything about this specifically. Okay, so I wanted to give an example, right? Because I know people like examples. Do not take this as gospel. Do not take this verbatim, but this is just an example of kind of what I mean. Okay, so let's say you have somebody that has like, because this is an example from my blog post, so I already have it written out. Let's say you've got somebody with the sun conjunct the GC, right? Depending on what else is doing right in the chart, and I don't know what this hypothetical chart looks like, so I'm just going to focus on this part here. You might be looking at somebody who, because I do think that the GC amplifies. I do think that it can change, that it can warp, that it can charge. You could be looking at somebody that has a massive fucking ego. You could be. You could also be looking at somebody that has some real serious identity issues. Perhaps some issues with self-worth, which sounds strange because, you know, it sounds like it might not swing that way. Sagittarius energy usually does things big. So in having the sun conjunct the GC, you would probably automatically think this person is going to have a bigger sense of, a bigger ego. But I don't think it always has to go that way. I also think the ego could be completely diminished here, to where the person doesn't have an ego at all, doesn't have an identity, doesn't know what that is. I could see it also going that way. It would depend on what else is going on in the chart. I could also see the GC functioning as a neutralizer, where the person doesn't have a big ego. The person doesn't have ego issues and with it swinging the other way. It just kind of neutralizes all of that. Perhaps they could have had if the sun had been placed somewhere else, maybe their ego would have been bigger, but because of the GC's influence, it ends up neutralizing it. I could see that happening too. It really would depend on the rest of the chart. So I guess the point is, keep your mind open when looking at the GC and planets conjunct it, and think outside traditional boxes. I do think conjunctions to the GC are protective. I think there is a protective quality to them. I think there is. I think this protection is amplified when the person has a conjunction to the GC and Jupiter retrograde. I do think Jupiter retrograde is incredibly protective. I really do. Especially for the galactic center inclined person. I think it is important. And it is protective. I think even for the person that doesn't have Jupiter retrograde but has a planet conjunct the GC, I do think that there is a protective quality about it. I just do. I feel like there is a protective quality about it. Now, when I say protection, I was looking at the charts of like whistleblowers and things like that, and looking at, looking at them and their charts, and it did seem like the ones that had conjunctions to the GC and Jupiter retrograde fared better in their whistleblowing, in their putting things out there. They didn't end up in prison. They didn't die under suspicious circumstances. It did seem like they fared better overall. And I know there was something with some of them about, I guess I'm primarily thinking about planets conjunct it, because I remember there was something like Karen Silkwood had one of the nodes conjunct, but that's not actually a planet. And she ended up dying under suspicious circumstances. But I feel like the Jupiter retrograde allows the person with GC conjunctions to do whatever it is that they feel inclined to do from the GC. And because we're talking about this being in Sagittarius, there is like a truth seeking, there is a belief seeking, there is a those themes are there. I also think conjunctions to the GC, and there's no way to actually prove this, but I do think conjunctions to the GC, I do think those planets are tuned in. This is just my personal belief. I think they're tuned in to the other side, or to other dimensions, or other realms. I think they are. I think they are. Like a little antenna. Well, I think those planets have like a little antenna on them anyway, picking things up. But I do think those planets are charged in that way. Now, does that mean that you're actually fed information from the other side, or from, or downloading things from the other side? You could be, and you don't know it. Or it could come through in other ways. It might not be like an audible voice in your ear, you know, telling you things. It might come through in other ways. But yeah, I do think there is some connection to other realms, other places. I do think these people are charged in that way. I do think they're charged in that way. Let me see if there was anything else about that I wanted to cover. And I think the downloads that people get probably have a lot to do with the planet that's conjunct the GC. Like, I don't know, somebody with Uranus conjunct the GC might do better with like getting downloads more revolutionary, like downloads, than somebody with, say, the moon conjunct the GC, unless you're talking about the moon and Uranus, you know, conjunct the GC. Yeah, if we're just talking about Uranus conjunct the GC, that person probably gets, or might get, those kind of downloads more than the person with, say, like the moon conjunct the GC. I do think the planet matters as far as what is being downloaded, or what you might get downloads about. And again, I'm not saying that it's like an actual audible voice going, you know, or whatever. It's, but in some way, I do think that the person is linked to other realms, to other places, to other beings. And these things probably do happen in their life. They may not realize what it's from, and it could also be from other things in the chart too, but I do think that this is one of those places that you could look for such things. Now, I also want to talk for just a few minutes about because this video is getting kind of long, for a few minutes about the conjunctions to the galactic anticenter. So I think that area of the chart, the galactic anticenter, that area of the chart, regardless, is going to act as a lightning rod, whether there's anything there or not. But if you have a planet conjunct the GC, and let's take the conjunctions to the GC out of the equation for just a second, and just look at the conjunctions to the anticenter. That planet is going to act as even more, I think, even more of a lightning rod, because there's an actual planet there for the energy to filter to. And keep in mind that even if you don't have a conjunction to the GC, all that energy is still there at the GC, and it's still going to have an overflow, or what I would think of as like an overflow, and it's going to shock the other end of the chart. I do think that's going to happen. Now, actually, I feel like if you have conjunctions to the anticenter and no conjunctions to the GC, I actually feel like there is something difficult about this, because you have all this energy at the GC, right? And it's not nothing, there's no planet there to absorb it, to help absorb it. So I almost feel like that planet, or planets, or Chiron, or the north or south nodes, or the major angle, or whatever you have there, I feel like it's almost shocked more frequently. It probably sustains more damage. I do think that this planet, or whatever is there at the anticenter, I think it probably does get damaged. I think it does. I think it takes the impact, so it does sustain damage. Let's not joke. Let's not kid ourselves about this. It does. If you have a planet conjunct the anticenter, that planet has damage. That doesn't mean it's fucked, but it does have damage. It is damaged. If you have multiple planets conjunct the galactic anticenter, that might actually be easier. Or multiple things there, that might actually be easier because it's spread out. That shocking is spread out over multiple things. Hopefully, I'm thinking that's how it would work. If you only have one thing conjunct the anticenter, that one thing is going to sustain a lot of damage. It just will. I think it will. What do you do about that? That's what matters. But it is going to take the impact. Now, because the anticenter is a calmer area in space, it's really not when it gets shocked, but it is, when you look at it in space, it is a calmer area compared to the GC with all the energy. So, but it's got, I mentioned before, it's got all the space dust around it. It's got a very bright fucking star near it, so it's blinded. The planet or planets that are there are probably more damaged than you are aware. So I would definitely, when interpreting those planets, I would definitely veer more on a challenging end of things. I would veer on a more challenging end of things, thinking that the person may not be as aware of those challenges, especially if there's no conjunction to the galactic center. If there's only a conjunction or conjunctions to the anticenter, I would definitely veer that way. When I would read that area, I would veer it in a more challenging way. Because I do think that area, that planet or planets or whatever, are probably more damaged than what the person is aware of. And then depending on, what that planet is or what we're talking about, what kind, all of that would play in. But I do think there's probably more damage there sustained than the person is probably aware. Let me see. I think that's good. I'm gonna make one more about this, I think, so because this one got long. If you are watching this on Instagram, you can, or if you want to follow us on Instagram, if you're watching us on Instagram, this doesn't matter. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Paterno Astrology on Instagram. If you are wanting to like or subscribe or whatever to us on YouTube, search for us at Let's Fuck With Astrology, YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.